Good afternoon, good morning, greetings from Taipei. Welcome to our webinar on the exclusion of Taiwan from Interpol structures. The webinar is organized by European Values Center for Security Policy Taiwan Office in cooperation with our EVC team in Prague. This webinar will address three interrelated dimensions of Taiwan's exclusion from Interpol. The first one would be Taiwan's international cooperation in law enforcement, also Taiwan's cooperation with international police structures, and the People's Republic of China use of Taiwan's exclusion from international organizations as an instrument of transnational repression and the implications for democratic resilience. Although Taiwan remains excluded from Interpol, it continues to engage in substantial legal and judicial cooperation with democratic partners. For instance, Taiwan and Poland signed an agreement on judicial cooperation and mutual legal assistance in criminal matters in 2016, while Taiwan and the Czech Republic concluded a memorandum of understanding on judicial cooperation and mutual assistance in 2019. These agreements illustrate how democratic partners can establish effective frameworks for collaboration, reinforcing the rule of law and shared democratic values, even in the absence of formal institutional participation. And to address these issues, we are joined by three excellent speakers, KJ Xu, Athena Tong, and Matej Szymalczyk, who also contributed to EBC bilingual bi-weekly Indo-Pacific Currents briefing on these topics. If you haven't subscribed yet to our briefing, you can do so at any time. Let me introduce our speakers first. KJ Xu is a judge in the National Security and Military Division of the Taipei District Court in Taiwan. He previously served as a visiting scholar at New York University School of Law and as a visiting fellow at the Global Taiwan Institute in Washington, D.C. His work focuses on national security law, lawfare, gray zone risk governance, and the protection of critical technologies and patent strategy in the context of economic security. He has been invited to engage in domestic and international policy exchanges on these issues. He is currently a PhD candidate in management at National Taiwan University. Athena Tong is a visiting researcher at the University of Tokyo, research associate and program lead at the China Strategic Risks Institute, non-resident Vassey Fellow at Pacific Forum, and an Indo-Pacific Young Leaders Program Fellow at the Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada. Her research focuses on economic security, critical infrastructure resilience, and PRC political warfare in the Indo-Pacific, with particular attention to Taiwan, Japan, and the broader regional security landscape. She was previously a visiting scholar at Taiwan's Research Institute for Democracy, Society, and Emerging Technology. Her work examines the intersection of geopolitics, information resilience, and strategic competition in East Asia. And last but not least, Matej Szymalczyk is an executive director of Central European Institute of Asian Studies. His research focuses on China's economic and political influence in Central Europe, elite relations, corrosive capital, and the role of European legal instruments in mitigating risks posed by China. He has a background in law and international relations and was listed in the Forbes 30 Under 30 Slovak edition in 2021. He is also a member of the expert pool at the European Center of Excellence for Countering Hybrid Threats and the European think tank network on China. In 2025, he became a visiting fellow at the Institute of National Defense and Security Research in Taipei under the Taiwan Fellowship Program. welcome all of you. A few technical remarks from my side. The webinar will last about 1 hour. The speakers will have 5 to 7 minutes for their interventions, followed by the moderated discussions and Q&A from the participants. Feel free to write your questions either in the chat or raise your hands to ask them verbally. And I just would like to remind you that the webinar is on record. So without further ado, I am giving the floor to our speakers. Kaiji, could you please start?
Yes, sure. Thanks, Olympia. Sorry, I don't know why I can't open my camera, but I think it's fine if you can listen me. So I will start for my speech. Yeah, so I think from the perspective of the Taiwanese judge working on national securities and the military-related cases, but my remark today is we offers interpersonal and analytical capacity. So I want to focus instead on institutional design, how democracies should think about law enforcement cooperation when authoritarians influence cybercrime and transnational repressions and are become increasingly intertwined. So my core argument is simple. Taiwan's exclusions from Interpol should not be understood only as a diplomatic dispute. It's a securities vulnerabilities. More precisely, it creates a democratic securities blind spot. I think for many years, the questions of Taiwan and Interpol has often been framed in symbolic terms. So whether Taiwan deserves international space, whether Taiwan is treated fairly, or whether Beijing should be allowed to block Taiwan's participations. I think those questions matters, but for law enforcement and the national securities practitioners, the issue is more political. The question is whether the global policies and architectures can afford to exclude a major democratic societies located at the center of Indo-Pacific trade, technology, transportation, finance, and cyber activities. I think Taiwan is not a marginal actor in the international system. It's a kind of it's a major for economies or keynote in semiconductor, industrial, and in the supply chain area. So Taiwanese company operates globally, like financial flow, cyber accidents, fraud network, or include like the drug route and organized crime do not stop Taiwan's political status. So I think this is why I describe Taiwan as a kind of data island inside for the global law enforcement architectures. The problem is not only that Taiwan receive information letters or through indirect channel. The problem is that international partners may also receive less information from Taiwan than they should. So, for examples, I want to apply the Europeans' experience in this topic. I think in July 2025, the Europol and the Eurojust coordinate an operation called Eastwood against the pro-Russia cybercrime network called No Names 057. The operation involved law enforcement and the judicial authorities across multiple jurisdictions, describe more than 100 servers, and lead to arrest warrant, search, and cross-border evidence coordination. The case shows that modern cyber enables trade can't be handled by one country alone. They require fast judicial cooperations, operation coordinations, evidence preservations, cyber expertise, and trusted information sharing across border. That examples matter for Taiwan. Taiwan face cyber threat, fraud network, technology theft, financial crime, and foreign interference from most of them from China. So I think they are part of wider authoritarian and criminal ecosystem. If Taiwan is excluded from key international policing mechanisms, this doesn't only hurt Taiwan, it weakens the border's democratic security network. But the deeper concerns go beyond the efficiency. International legal cooperation is increasing. becoming a contest space. Authoritarian states doesn't always attack democratic system from the outside. They also learn to operate inside institutions, procedure, and the legal mechanism. This is visible in concerns over the potential politicizations of Interpol Red Notice. A red notice, I think everyone might know, is a requirement to circulate to law enforcement authority worldwide to locate and provisional arrest wanted persons pending extradition, surrenders, or similar legal action. It's not an international arrest warrant, and the member states decide under their own domestic law whether to act on it. But in practice, the consequence can still be severe. A politically motivated notice can restrict travels, damage reputations, freeze opportunities, and create legal pressure across jurisdictions. This is why democratic governments and human rights organizations have warned that authoritarian regions may misuse international legal tool to target dissidents, activists, journalists, religious group, business figures, and separate the community abroad. This is no longer only traditional intelligent activity. It's a transnational repression through administrative and the legal system. From Taiwan's perspective, the danger is the twofold. First, Taiwan is excluded from full participations in the system. Second, Beijing has greater opportunity to shape a narrative, restrict information flow, and break a symmetry inside that system. When a democracy is outside the room, the problem is not only absence. The problem is that others can define the fact, the categories, and the legal framings before Taiwan can respond. This connects directly with borders European concerns. In Central and Eastern Europe, many countries have studied coercive capitals, elite captures, political influence operations, and the use of legal and economic instruments to create dependencies. In East Asia, we see similar pattern. Despite the exclusion from Interpol, Taiwan has not remained passive. Taiwan has developed alternative mechanisms of international law enforcement cooperations, including criminal liaison officers and drug liaison officer. This liaison network often provides speed and confidentiality and operational flexibilities through cooperations with agencies such as the FBI, DEAs, and the region's counterpart in South, and like ASEAN, Taiwan has built practical channels to address fraud, drug trafficking, money laundering, cybercrime, and some others organized crime activities. So this experience still offers one important lesson. Democratic resilience doesn't always rely on like a formal organization. Sometimes it begins with a trust operation relationship. It's kind of informal institutions. So I think so in the end, I would suggest three policy direction for this. First, democratic patterns should frame Taiwan's participations in international law enforcement mechanism as a matter of operation securities. The argument should not be only that Taiwan deserves fairness. The stronger argument is that excluding Taiwan's create a valuable risk for everyone. Second, democratic government should strengthen, secures liaisons-based cooperations with Taiwan in cybercrime, financial crime, drugs, organized crime, and technology theft. Where formal participation is blocked, trust democratic patterns should build a more political bridge. The third, the democracy should improve safeguard against the politicalizations of international legal cooperation mechanism. So rare notice like extraditions requests, judicial assistance, and the information sharing system must be protected from authoritarian misuse. Institutional neutralities can be assumed when authoritarian status threat institutions themselves as a tool of a strategic competition. Taiwan's case is therefore not only about Taiwan, it's the test of whether democracy can adapt their institutions to the realities of modern security competition. If authoritarian regions are learning to weaponize in legal and administrative systems, democracy must learn to defend themselves systems through transparencies, operational abilities, and trust cooperation. The goal is preventing authoritarian states from politicizing it first. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to your Q&A section.
Thank you, KJ. Thank you for highlighting that exclusion of Taiwan poses difficulties and operational difficulties, not only to Taiwan, but also for other countries. Let's now let's invite Athena for her remarks.
Thanks, Olympia. Thank you for having us, and it's a pleasure to be able to talk about this important topic alongside KJ and Matei. As you heard from their bios, I will be relying on my esteemed colleagues on their legalistic expertise. My job today is to put this in the context of PRC cognitive and narrative warfare and how that relates to the wider spectrum of things. So let me start somewhere that might seem a little further from Interpol. For the past few years, much of my work has been spent watching how Beijing fights at sea, for example, off Scarborough Shoal, around the Senkaku Islands, and the waters off Kinmen. And often that includes courts as well, international ones at that. And the striking thing is that the most consequential battles there aren't really about the vessels. They're mostly about the narrative. Each collision, each water cannon incident is immediately repackaged. China as the lawful steward and the neighbors as the reckless provocateur. And the PLA has a name for this. They call it the three warfares. Some of you may be familiar with this. You have psychological warfare, you have media warfare or cognitive warfare, and lawfare. The point of this is to achieve strategic goals invisibly without firing a shot, which some of us refer to as gray zone warfare. And what I want to argue today is that Taiwan's exclusion from Interpol is not a separate dry bureaucratic story. It is that same doctrine applied to an institution instead of a reef. So when we talk about the Interpol exclusion, we instinctively reach for the language of accident. We say there's a gap, a lack of access, or an unfortunate situation. But I suggest that every time we use that sort of vocabulary, we are doing Beijing's work for them, because the exclusion isn't actually passive. Taiwan was a full member from 1961 to 1984, and then it was removed. This is the door that somebody built and bolted shut. And the question worth 7 minutes of your time during my initial remarks is why a state would spend real diplomatic capital keeping a capable police partner locked out. The answer is the lawfare piece of this doctrine. In my research on the maritime disputes, I keep seeing the same move. Beijing builds what can be called a legalistic scaffolding for control. It takes a legal instrument that means one thing and insists loudly and repeatedly that it means something far broader. And the clearest example that most of us will be familiar with is the UN Resolution 2758. That resolution did one narrow thing in 1971. It decided who occupies China's seat at the UN. It says nothing about Taiwan's sovereignty. It doesn't mention Taiwan. And yet Beijing has built an entire global campaign on the myth that 2758 settled Taiwan's status, and then used this myth to pry Taiwan out of the WHO, out of ICAO, out of Interpol, one body at a time. So Interpol isn't the exception, it's a node in a pattern. Now, here's the part that I think we should pay a little bit more attention to, because the exclusion is not only lawfare, which, of course, lawfare in itself is extremely important. And as judging by those of us who are here today, a lot of you are experts in the law or legal studies. But for me, I think it is important to combine this with the cognitive warfare side of things, because it's an operation that is aimed at perception, which then creates a new norm and therefore affects international law. Its real target isn't actually Taipei, it's us. Because a door kept shut long enough makes people forget anyone was ever meant to walk through it. And repeat that absence across enough institutions for enough years, and you slowly convert absence into the appearance of non-existence. That's a salami slicing logic I track at sea, and simply transposed into the diplomatic domain. Incremental, deniable, and designed to feel normal. So each exclusion becomes the precedent for the next. And this campaign exploits something that's quite specific about us, which is the democratic lag. Beijing moves fast with volume and ambiguity because it doesn't have to consult anybody. It just kind of does what it does without much consequences from the people. While open societies or democratic societies are still deciding whether something is even a problem. By the time we form a view, the new reality already feels settled. So that's the sharp irony that I feel we should address because it exposes the intent. Beijing invokes one China to bar Taiwan from the cooperative functions of Interpol, the databases, the alerts, the I-24/7 network, but it happily reaches into the coercive functions of the very same institution, weaponizing red notices against dissidents, activists, former officials, pressuring their families back home. So it shuts Taiwan out of the part that catches criminals and reaches in through the part that hunts critics. Exclusion and abuse are not two stories. They are the same instrument, but used two ways. And the people caught in the gap are very often Taiwanese themselves as well. This is the part that I hope that we don't forget, because at one time this was in the news, but it seemed to have faded away in recent years. In case after case from Kenya and Armenia in 2016 to Spain to Cambodia just last year, actually, people traveling on Taiwanese passports arrested abroad on fraud allegations have been deported not to Taipei, but to the PRC. So Beijing asserts jurisdictions over Taiwan's own nationals, and the institutional silence around Taiwan lets it. That is lawfare made physical, the one China claim reaching across borders to override Taiwan's authority over its own citizens. So when we discuss Taiwan's exclusion as an abstraction, remember it has a human cost measured in individual people who disappear into a jurisdiction that was never theirs. And it's not victimless. It's being cut off from real-time data. Taiwan's own police say that the intelligence they get is often out of date and incorrect, and they have to ask friendly nations to relay alerts for them. As Taiwan sits right on the top of the fraud, scam compound, and trafficking networks now functioning out of Southeast Asia. When Taipei cannot transmit an alert, the blind spot isn't Taiwan's alone, as KJ very rightly pointed out earlier, it's everybody's. Beijing has engineered a vulnerability into the shared security of democracies and called it a gap. So what do we do? The same things I would prescribe against any FIMI campaign. First, and it costs nothing, we have to name it accurately. We need to stop calling it a gap. It's coercive lawfare, it's information operations. Naming it denies Beijing the silence the whole strategy actually depends on. Second is to try to match the speed. While we are democracies and we have a process and mechanism in these things, we can perhaps fight for back observer status for Taiwan at Interpol now as a realistic, proportionate ask. There's already momentum with US having a mandate on this for the past decade, and legislation that was introduced late last year. And third, to deepen the bilateral cooperation that demonstrably works, because the most powerful counter-narrative is simply showing that this cooperation with Taiwan actually delivers results. So my one ask is to retire the single word. I agree with KJ. I think this conclusion of mine echoes rather well with his, is that Taiwan's participation is not a favor. The locked door at Interpol is a vulnerability that Beijing built into our collective security, and recognizing it for what it is out loud is not charity. It's the first move in our own collective defense. So thank you, and I look forward to our discussion ahead.
Thank you, Athena, for your intervention, and thank you for pointing out that international institutions are becoming the arena for transnational repression, and it affects individuals also. And let's move now to our next speaker, Matej Malczyk. The floor is yours.
Thank you for welcoming me, and good afternoon or good morning to everyone. We've heard so far very good descriptions of why it is a problem that Taiwan is excluded from Interpol. Just to recap, and I fully agree with what was said already, the fact that Taiwan has a very globalized economy, it means that the crime it faces is also globalized or transnational, and this transnational crime needs a transnational response. Of course, the fact that Taiwan is excluded from global policing networks, it means that we have these blind spots in how we are investigating and prosecuting transnational crime, ranging from financial fraud all the way to smuggling or of drugs or various forms of sanctions or export control evasion, which are increasingly crucial as we are navigating geopolitical and geo-economic races against China, for example. But I want to talk about more about how Taiwan can and what it is already doing to overcome this exclusion in terms of establishing various forms of informal and formal bilateral cooperation mechanisms with like-minded partners who are crucial for Taiwan in terms of ensuring that they are able to, at the end of the day, work together on joint law enforcement and adjudication of transnational crime. So to overcome this exclusion and to improve coordination with external partners and work together on experience sharing, we've seen various forms of informal cooperation mechanisms emerge over the past several years. Looking at Europe, for example, we've seen engagements of Taiwanese officials with Europol and Eurojust, essentially EU's versions of Interpol, working on a smaller geographic scale, while also developing experience sharing platforms with national level law enforcement and prosecutorial authorities. Working on both of these levels, the EU level as well as the member state level, is of course important for one key reason. The jurisdiction or competencies over criminal justice are what we call a shared competence in the EU, meaning that one part of it belongs to the EU institutions, the EU Commission, but the majority still are vested with the member states, and effective collaborations requires that Taiwan focuses on both of these levels. While we've seen various forms of this informal cooperation and training mechanisms emerge, what we are facing is that formal legal cooperation is still lagging behind. What I mean by formal legal cooperation is conclusion of various binding international agreements on judicial cooperation and mutual legal assistance in criminal matters or even extradition treaties. So far across Europe, we know of 6 agreements that Taiwan has managed to sign with individual European states. These would be with Denmark, Germany, Poland, Slovakia, Switzerland, and the UK. Out of these 6, 3 are very narrow in their scope, focusing only on transfer of sentenced persons, meaning they don't really help overall that much with overcoming the exclusion from Interpol, as they come into play only post hoc after the investigation, prosecution, and adjudication is already over. 3 of them are, however, fairly comprehensive. Those would be with Germany, Poland, and Slovakia, which include mechanisms for various aspects of mutual legal assistance, from serving of documents, forming joint investigative teams, working together on evidence collection, and in case of Poland and Slovakia also have an extradition clause, which helps to extradite suspects from one country to the other. Conclusion of this type of treaties should be among priorities for Taiwan when it's engaging European states, I believe, and that is for 3 main reasons. Looking at this from a legal perspective, first of all, when it comes to extraditions, the fact that governments are willing to sign an extradition treaty or another form of legal cooperation treaty with Taiwan, it signals to the judiciary, which gives an approval to the extradition, that Taiwan is a reliable partner with whom we expect extradition can proceed in a fairly smooth manner without any sort of ad hoc hiccups that could be emerging. Secondly, it helps to also protect Taiwanese citizens from surrendering to China. This is what Athena has been describing as a form of lawfare, that Taiwanese citizens would be extradited to China on, for example, fraud suspicions. And we had a couple of cases like this in Europe, but I'm going to focus on the one with Poland, because this one clearly shows that concluding Judicial Cooperation Treaty, which also includes an extradition clause, helps to protect Taiwanese citizens. This goes back to 2017 when a Taiwanese national, Mr. Liu, was accused of committing telecom fraud against PRC nationals. China requested from Poland that he be extradited to China, and originally Poland in 2017 agreed to this extradition request. Mr. Liu battled through Polish and European courts on this, and out of it we got a really seminal precedent from the European Court of Human Rights, the Liu v. Poland case, which at the end of the day essentially banned all extraditions to China, regardless of whatever crime is being the person accused of, citing that what they called a general situation of violence in China, meaning that there is a very high systemic risk that the extradited person would be subjected to torture or other forms of cruel and inhuman punishment, as well as lacking any sort of guardrails for being subjected to a fair trial. In the meantime, Poland in 2019 concluded the agreement on judicial cooperation and extradition. And after this treaty has come to force, Taiwan has actually requested that Mr. Liu be extradited to Taiwan instead of to China, where he is currently located in Taiwan, where he's now being processed for further criminal proceedings. So this has really help to safeguard a very specific Taiwanese citizens from extradition to China in a very specific scenario. Last but not least, there's a third benefit that Taiwan can derive from concluding these kind of agreements, and that is that it helps to expand Taiwan's international space by very strongly implying sovereignty. Criminal proceedings are one of the key elements to any state's sovereignty, as they deal with the prerogative of any state for lawful use of force, or the so-called state monopoly on violence. And by willing to give up its sovereignty in favor of another state when it comes to extradition, for example, it implies that the other party also possesses sovereignty, and this, of course, helps Taiwan also in this narrative battle with China in terms of asserting its international space. While I'll mention that Taiwan already has 6 of these agreements in place, it should focus on expanding this with more European states. Of course, these kind of agreements Taiwan has in place also with other key partners outside of Europe, like with US or the diplomatic allies that Taiwan has, for example, with Paraguay. But in Europe, I think it could still do more with regards to opening these negotiations with countries that are already very politically open to Taiwan, yet have not yet dealt with this topic. France, Czech Republic, or Lithuania comes to mind, or with countries cooperation with which it's crucial for efficient export controls enforcement, like with Netherlands, which is a crucial partner for Taiwan in terms of the semiconductor industry, meaning it's also crucial for implementing export controls related to semiconductors, or some of the upcoming countries which have been recently signaling that they might be open to more collaboration with Taiwan, like Estonia or Romania, or even Belgium, which very recently concluded a sort of very first case of joint evidence taking together with Taiwanese law enforcement in a drugs-related case. To improve its odds that the European actors will be taking this on, Taiwan needs to, I think, improve its signaling of normative convergence with European countries when it comes to rule of law standards and fair trial standards. One key obstacle here could be the fact that, of course, European states have a very strong stance on illegality of death penalty, which Taiwan still maintains, and which was, I think, 2 years ago upheld by the Taiwanese Constitutional Court. This is a continuing point of contention between EU and Taiwan, pretty much raised annually in a human rights dialogue that Taiwan and EU has. And so if Taiwan would be able to signal to European countries that it is path, if not on a path to abolition, at least on a path to reinstating a moratorium on death sentence, this would help to signal this sort of normative convergence, which would make it easier for European judiciaries to cooperate on extraditions, for example.
Thank you, Maciej. Thank you for this thorough overview of legal cooperation of Taiwan with European countries. We will move now to our discussion part of the webinar. I will take the liberty of asking the first question as the moderator. To all of you, to you, Athena, Maciej, and KJ. And my question is related to what you mentioned about how Taiwan responded to the exclusion from the Interpol structures by building alternative networks of cooperation through trusted partnerships and different kinds of operational relationships. And my question is, do you see parallel cooperation architectures as only temporary workaround since it's exclusion from the Interpol, or you think given the geopolitical situation, this kind of cooperation could offer a model for democratic cooperation in general, when in this era, when international institutions are increasingly contested and vulnerable to political pressure. So I don't know who would like to start. Give you some rest, Maciej. Maybe let's start from Athena.
Sure. I mean, Maciej actually pretty extensively described the bilateral agreements that have been put into work due to Taiwan's exclusion from Interpol, and how they have not only in theory but practically have been working, leading to multiple arrests and deportations, etc. I believe that mutual legal assistance agreements are here to stay, but of course it means that even though it works, it's a little slower because it's bilateral, it's not multilateral. So the intelligence is shared not through a mechanism that has been well, I guess optimized to be shared among nations so that they can work together not only between two countries and two nation states. While, of course, we hope that eventually Taiwan can be integrated in the Interpol mechanisms, this is what has to work for now. And what the inclusion of Taiwan, even as an observer into Interpol, indicates is the scaling of this, so that it can work faster, it can work more efficiently, and that they don't have to pass through so many hurdles, so that there's a chance for criminals to get away. That would be my view, but I leave the legalistic side of things to KJ and Maciej on this.
I don't know if KJ wants to chime in.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think for this question should be like step-by-step method. For example, I think the first step will be we can use the kind of informal collaborations, kind of like liaison systems. everybody knows there's a lot of like FBI, CIA's agents in Taiwan to exchange the information, intelligence, and somehow have some operation. So that's the first step. I think the second step will be if we have these routines, operations, collaborations, Taiwan and other country might build up like a bilateral kind of MOU as a second step, and then the final will be if we get used to these operations, Taiwan might have more chance to build up like a multilateral MOU or kind of organization. So that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, from my perspective, of course, the ideal case would be that Taiwan would be able to have both, right? To have a membership in Interpol, and if not the membership, at least an observer status, while at the same time also expanding the scope of the bilateral agreements, because while the bilateral agreements can to some extent offset the lack of participation in Interpol, they are not necessarily a sort of a one-to-one fix, right? Both of these mechanisms deal with somewhat different aspects of legal cooperation, and any state pursues actually to have both, right? To be an active member of Interpol, while also setting up these bilateral ties and treaties on mutual legal assistance, because some of the aspects of mutual legal assistance cannot be done via Interpol, and they can be only done on this bilateral basis. That being said, and I maybe I have not mentioned that before, is that concluding legally binding treaties on mutual legal assistance is a challenge in and of itself for Taiwan, right? Because we have so many countries, right, that don't have a diplomatic recognition of Taiwan, that subscribe to very Beijing-aligned readings of their One China policies, which makes them wary of concluding legally binding agreements as well, right? But at the same time, it's just easier for Taiwan to convince some of the partners in Europe, elsewhere in the world, to move towards concluding binding treaties rather than achieving membership or observer status in Interpol, which is that much more difficult to achieve. And given China's increasing role within the Interpol structures, potentially also dangerous for Taiwanese representatives. Just to keep in mind that the next general meeting of Interpol that will be happening towards the end of this year will be in Hong Kong, for example.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the audience? Okay, so far no questions. So I have another question related to something, Maciej, you mentioned during your intervention. You mentioned that Taiwan could strengthen its case for deeper cooperation with in legal issues by demonstrating convergence with European rule of law standards, and you specifically mentioned the death penalty. So there are other countries also that are within the Interpol structures that still actually have death penalty, right, in their judicial system. So my question is actually to why is it so important, you think, in this case, and to what extent the normative considerations actually should and influence decisions on judicial cooperation. And that's the question not only, of course, to Maciej, but also I would like to know what you think about it, Athena and KJ.
Well, I mean, of course, it is possible to have these sort of judicial cooperation relations with any country, even if it maintains death penalty. That is in and of itself not necessarily a barrier to this cooperation, right? Where it can become a barrier is the extradition process, which has to follow the so-called non-refoulement principle, meaning that the extradited person cannot face harm in the country to which they are extradited. And even that, of course, can be worked around by offering diplomatic assurances by the requesting side that they will simply not pursue death penalty against the extradited person. That being said, Taiwan is in a very precarious position that it already fights an uphill battle in terms of countries being willing to form and conclude legally binding international agreements with it, right? So why offer them additional reasons why this should not be pursued, right? And this is where the topic of normative convergence and signaling this normative convergence that Taiwan simply subscribes to same rule of law and human rights standards would be very helpful, I think. Of course, we have to recognize that death penalty abolition is a very unpopular topic within Taiwan itself, right? So, so a full abolition maybe would not be possible, but for example, moves like the Constitutional Court ruling 2 years ago, which on one hand it reaffirmed that the death penalty is constitutional, but set much stricter rules around it in which kind of cases it is permissible and under what conditions. These sort of gradual steps towards, if not a moratorium, at least limiting the space in which it can be used, are things that signal that Taiwan is moving into a similar reading of its human rights obligations that Europe has as well.
Thank you. Athena, would you like to add something?
Maybe just briefly, because Matei has pretty much covered it. I mean, looking at the case of Hong Kong, the reason we opposed the extradition law so much was because China, the PRC, has capital punishment, whereas Hong Kong does not. So for us, it was unfathomable to extradite somebody to that jurisdiction. But as Matei has mentioned, it is not pragmatic to expect this to change in at least the next 5 to 10 years in Taiwan, in that they would have the capital punishment. And but I would say that it would help to try to approach the human rights standard in countries that they want to collaborate with in terms of extradition. And it's not only just the human rights side of things, right? It's also, for example, how Japan has to match the standard for intelligence operations to countries in the Five Eyes in order to cooperate with them. That I think is just diplomacy 101. So I think it would help, of course, to match those standards.
Thank you. KJ, would you like to add anything?
Yes, for my perspective, I think we can
I think we lost you. I don't know if you can hear us. Okay, KJ, I hope you can hear us because we cannot hear you. I think KJ will join us soon again. Okay, so let's move to another question. And again, I would like to ask whether there are any questions from our participants. Okay, if there are no question, I have a question. Okay, so all right, let me just see. Someone is writing in the chat box. So there is one question, and I will read it to all of you. Taiwan has had international campaigns for the observer status in Interpol, but not been successful. how realistic is it to expect success in being admitted as an observer, and what more Taiwan and other democracies can do for Taiwan to achieve inclusion? You can go through this question one more time. It's in our chat box. I'll just quickly go back to KJ to see whether it's possible for him to finish his response. KJ, are you with us?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, disconnect for the internet. Yeah. So yeah, long and short, my answer is to building common standards maybe even more important than like kind of formal organizations or members. So I think these standards should be built up to, for example, for the Interpol, such as the rule of the political offenders should not be extradited or targeted through law enforcement mechanism. So I think Taiwan and the other democracies should build up the somehow the rule of law or standards to enhance or achieve the collaborations instead of like the formal organizations or like join to specific group. So that is my answer.
Thank you. And while you were away, we received one question, which I'm going to read one more time. Taiwan has had international campaigns for observer status in Interpol, but not been successful. How realistic is it to expect success in being admitted as an observer, and what more Taiwan and other democracies can do for Taiwan to achieve inclusion? So that's the question. Who would like to answer first?
Maybe I can start if no one else wants to volunteer. Look, I think it's very important that we keep this topic on the agenda, right? That the democratic partners of Taiwan keep pushing for Taiwan's inclusion in Interpol, but also other international organization in the sort of family of UN technical organizations like WHO, International Civil Aviation Organization, etc. Right? But we also have to be realistic, and we see that China keeps pushing on redrawing the red lines further and further of what kind of Taiwan's international engagements it finds acceptable, and we see that this becomes more difficult year by year. So I don't think that we can expect Taiwan to be realistically successful in this bid in a sort of short to midterm basis. Something would have to change fundamentally in how China approaches this for this to be able to happen. So then the question is, what can we do besides continually campaigning, right? And I've hinted at this with my initial remarks that creation of these parallel structures can be helpful. Not just the formal legal assistance treaties, but like looking at us in EU, right? Why don't we work more with Taiwan, for example, in the Europol, Eurojust setting, and offer Taiwan observer status within this smaller version of Interpol? It would not help with everything, right? Because of course it doesn't cover the entirety of global police cooperation, but it does cover a significant part of the world with which Taiwan has already deep economic ties, meaning that a large portion of the transnational crime that both Taiwan and Europe are facing could be covered by this kind of approach, maybe.
Thank you. Asina, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I think what Matej has suggested with Europol makes sense, especially given how much success Taiwan has had with European countries already in their collaboration, like the first judicial extradition in collaboration with Poland, first return of Taiwanese national with Portugal, parallel joint operations with Turkey, etc. That could be a way to go. When it comes to how realistic it is, as Matej has mentioned, it's important to keep up momentum and to not let things slip, because if we don't voice out, in that silence is when PRC pushes the line further. So as Yujie mentioned, in 2023, more than 60 member states voiced support for Taiwan's bid, but it was declined by then Interpol's Secretary General Jürgen Stock, citing the General Assembly's recognition of the PRC as the representative of China at the time. So in the same vein, it is important to target the narrative behind it, because the law is not just about what makes sense, it's also what is now the norm and fitting the law around that. So we have to prevent this definition of sovereignty from becoming the absolute norm and therefore unchangeable later down the road as we navigate how we would like our upcoming international order to look like, because it definitely is not what it was supposed to look like post-war.
Thank you. And KJ?
Yes, I totally agree with the opinion from Mate and Asina, because I think, for example, the Europol is a very good organization that Taiwan can get involved. Perhaps Taiwan should, first demonstrate its values through specific cases to showing how Taiwan can provide some value or securities contributions. So it will no longer be only a political debate about the statements. So instead, it will show Taiwan can make a real contributions to those organizations. And I think Europe can be a very good start, like Europe Justice or Europol. Thank you.
Thank you. And let me read another question from the box. If obtaining observer status is challenging, how should Taiwan proceed in a practical way without observer status, for example, by exchanging intelligence with other countries? Would anyone like to add anything more about this, regarding this question?
Yeah, let me answer this question. I think even though we have kind of intelligence sharing MOU or treaty, it's still very hard because it will highly depends on the operation level. So I think the issue will be how can the people in the front line, the operation levels people, they have kind of a system or platform to talk or to collaborate in the future, not only rely on the organizations. So only when we have like a very solid collaborations experience, then we can talk about how to conquer or persist this collaboration in the future. Yeah, in particle, that's my experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Athena and Mati, would you like to add anything?
I echo what KJ has been saying. Of course, intelligence sharing with other countries is an important way what can be done on a bilateral level. And my understanding is that it is already happening to some extent, right? The other thing that would be useful is also to find sort of mechanisms in which, in a maybe more ad hoc way, joint investigation team and joint evidence collection efforts can be done, like what was done a few years back with Belgium. The problem is that all of this is, of course, a sort of measure that replaces something else, right? So it's never going to be 100% as good as what it is trying to replace. The fact that these mechanisms might be happening in a let's say legal vacuum without an underlying treaty, for example, that introduces a layer of unpredictability, right? A lot of the legal cooperation, mutual legal assistance can actually happen without treaties in place. Domestic criminal laws already provided for it on a unilateral level, but lacking that sort of formal treaty, underlying treaty, means that it can be much more easily susceptible to domestic politicization of this and various forms of ad hoc unpredictability that a treaty would be in many ways removing.
Thank you. Athena?
Yeah, I mean, there is already methods for Taiwan to obtain the intelligence, albeit a little slower. For example, Taiwan receives Interpol origin information indirectly, traditionally, historically via NCB Tokyo, which Japan's NPA actually agreed to use to relay information to Taipei. But again, it's a little slower, so by the time they have it, maybe it's already outdated. There's also the police liaison officers, which I believe KJ mentioned in his earlier remarks, where Taiwan's Criminal Investigation Bureau posts the officers to 13 plus countries. And of course, we have had a pretty active GCTF platform in Taiwan, which allows for track 1.5 or track 2 collaboration and information sharing. So I think we should perhaps make better use of it if observer status is challenging. And of course, again, harking back to what Matei and KJ have suggested earlier, working on getting the maybe a smaller multilateral arrangement possible, or strengthening bilateral ones, or establishing new bilateral MLA networks.
Thank you. Our time is almost up, but I think we have room for one more question if anyone would like to ask any question. Okay. Yes, I muted myself. All right, so if I may, I have just one maybe short question. I would like to get back to transnational repression, and that you all mentioned. And actually, do you have any comments on this difficulty or the issue of striking this balance between preventing authoritarian governments from exploiting these international mechanisms for political purposes, but on the other hand, preserving the credibility of the institutions and letting them do their jobs. So do you have any comments on that?
Let me maybe take a look back at this Polish case I was mentioning in the beginning, the Liu v. Poland case, right? Because that's, I think, quite instructive in many ways, because the Liu v. Poland case is actually not a case of transnational repression. Based on what we know, Mr. Liu actually committed a telecom fraud case against PRC nationals, right? So in many ways, we can even say that China's initial request for extradition was maybe legitimate on this ground, that there was an actual criminal case that was that needed to be prosecuted. But what this case helped us with is that thanks to the case law from European Court of Human Rights, we now actually don't need to ask this question, whether the extradition request, for example, pursues legitimate or illegitimate goals, right? Because the findings of the court, citing reports from Amnesty International, etc., is that simply there's even if the crime is real, there's no way the person will be able to receive a fair trial in China, or face a punishment that would not be at the systemic risk of cruel and inhuman punishment, or even torture, right? So we don't have to ask actually this question anymore, because simply we cannot just give anyone to China regardless of what the crime is. So but of course, this is a ECTHR case law, right? It's not really written anywhere in a hard law that you cannot extradite to China, right? So we still need to work on disseminating this knowledge to our law enforcement and judicial authorities, so that they are aware of this, that there is actually this kind of opinion of ECTHR, so that these kind of extradition cases would get thrown out of the court immediately, and the person in question would not have to even go through this lengthy legal battle of getting to the ECTHR level. Yeah.
Thank you. Asina, would you like to add anything?
Sure. Maybe I can go for some of the TNR cases that are more perhaps more explicit, which is more on the red notice abuse. Of course, this is more from the successful ones, at least have been more pre-2022. Some of them have been on red notice for like 20 years, like Dokanisa from the UUC or just Idris Hassan, where they eventually they are safe. It's just they have been detained, threatened at countries like South Korea, like Turkey, Casablanca. Well, you of course also have the Operation Skynet in 2015, where there were around 100 red notices, and there were returns of those PRC nationals via family coercion. But more recently, we have seen an improvement on it. Of course, where there is a system, it will always be abused by malign actors, like the PRC or Russia, of course. It's just something that will always be there. It's just how the system can have mechanisms to fight that sort of abuse. And in April this year, there was a Uyghur researcher, Abdul Hakim Idris, who was detained around 21 hours on arrival in Kuala Lumpur and denied entry. But thankfully, he was sent to the US. But that is still transnational repression. And in 2018, a little earlier, 11 Uyghurs escaped Thai prison and were held in Malaysia for around a year on China's red notice. But the Malaysian court actually dropped the charges on humanitarian grounds and let them fly to Turkey despite Beijing's protests. So this is another way to counterbalance the abuses of the system that we have at hand on Interpol, which is ensuring that there is enough human rights safeguarding on domestic laws, especially for those countries that Taiwan hopes to strengthen ties with or to have more collaboration with. It's definitely something that Taiwan has an interest in advocating for.
Yeah, I think it's a very, very important, timely, and bigger questions. So, I mean, I think the first step, which is if you want to regulate it, we need to realize the definitions of the transnational repression. I think still, even now, no one can have a very clear definition for that. So, if you cannot take a look or make a definition, it's still very hard to regulate it. Yeah, so here I also have one advertising, which is there's a one GCTF program in next week will hold by Canadians. We will talk about transnational repressions. So I think we should have more talk related to this quite important topic in the future. Yeah, that's my answer. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Our time is up, so I would like to thank our three speakers for sharing your expertise and perspectives on these issues that we just discussed. And thank you for all the participants for being here. The webinar will be soon on our EVC website. That's all for today, and have a good day.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you, Mate. Thank you, Asina.
Bye-bye.
Okay.